Tough Call Mediation is brought to you by Ehler Mediation and Legal Services, serving your mediation and legal service needs in Ontario, New York, and throughout North America. You can reach us at info@ehlerservices.com or go to our website at ehlerservices.com. That's EHLER services.com.
Hello, and welcome to Tough Call, a mediation podcast. My name is CT Ehler, and I'm here with my co-host, Dale Sheldon.
Hello.
And we are also delighted to have Gerette. How do we say your last name? I forgot to ask you your last name. How do I pronounce that?
Yeah, the first name is also tricky, but you did it beautifully. My last name is even tougher, and that is Buglion.
Buglion. Okay.
Yes.
Is that French?
No, it's actually Italian. It used to have an E at the end and be Buglione.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my mother's side of the family, two of her siblings married Italians, and one Roman, one Sicilian. And, you know, the Romance languages, I mean, sometimes you can think something's French, and then you hear the Spanish or the Italian, and you're like, oh, no, that's not how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have an ancestor, his last name is spelled Guerraz, and I'm from California. So when I first saw that, I thought it was Gerette. Or Gerette, you know, like a Spanish California name.
Right.
But he was from French Switzerland, and it's Gerette.
Okay.
I never would have known that.
Yep.
Never would have known that.
It took me a while to figure that one out.
All right. Yeah. So I'm so glad that we got in contact today. And listeners, we had some technical difficulties, and Gerette was very patient with us. I mean, oh my gosh, thank you so much. You know, it technology, right? It just has those things. But one of the things I was really curious to speak, I want to hear about some of the courses you run. I would love to hear about how you got in to be the expert that you are today. But also, you talk a lot about power dynamics. And as a mediator, it's really important to look for those things. But I'm not even sure sometimes how to prepare other people for when they're coming and talking to me about power dynamics. I can hear it, but I don't know if they're even aware of it. So how do we help listeners, the general public, understand that they could be in a really extreme power differential? So it's just, just tell me everything, Gerette. Okay?
Well, let's start with, that little question you kind of slipped in, like, how did I get to be doing this work that I'm doing today? How does one become, I don't consider myself an expert. I do know a few things about cultic involvement, and I did gain some expertise, I can say, through the School of Life. I spent 18 years in a cultic group, and I got out of that group. It was a kind of a new agey self-help therapy-based kind of group. And I got out of it after being involved for 18 years. My husband was also involved. He left it after 16 years. And then I stayed in another 2 years where I took an even deeper dive. And when I finally exited, it was rather sudden because I had the experience of being able to very quickly see the dynamics of what actually was happening, of what I had been blind to.
Right.
And most people, I can say this now just from my experience of working, with people, with many, many survivors and writers who have been involved in cultic environments. Most people have a slower exit than I did. So mine was pretty sudden. And I literally had the experience of being in like a big traumatic, I shouldn't say traumatic, a big dramatic meeting.
Dramatic can be traumatic, though. So
indeed,
yeah.
Yes, there can very much be a link. And in that meeting, I got to hear one of my beloved colleagues speak from her heart. And this is a very trusted person, someone who has I would say, a deep honesty about her, and is an artist and someone who I had some great intimacy and trust in. And when she spoke from her heart about what our teacher had done to her, I knew she was telling the truth. And that truth of what she was describing did not match up with the pedestal that I had put our teacher on. And so in hearing that, her description, it was that cognitive dissonance created this, what I call the crack that let in the light for me, literally. Like, so I had that experience in the meeting. I left that meeting quietly. I did not speak to a single person. I drove home, and by the time I got home, it's about a 45-minute drive through this long wilderness place. By the time I got home, I stood at my house, and I knew it was over. And at that point, it took me maybe a week to be able to use the word cult. But I knew that what I had been involved in, that I knew that that my brain, that my psyche had been hijacked.
Right.
And what I thought I had been involved in is not what I actually was involved in.
Wow.
That's so hard. And I should mention, I was in yoga for a very, very long time. And one of my first teacher trainings was at Kripalu and Amrit Desai. There's a lot of people who don't understand that Amrit Desai was someone who brought Kripalu Yoga over, and he started the ashram, right?
I've been there.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, when he was still there.
Oh, wow.
I was at Kripalu. I know who you're talking about.
Oh my gosh. So my teacher had gone and done training under Amrit. And when I went and I did my teacher training in 2002, Chandrakant was leaving and going to Amrit Yoga in Florida. And we've broke for lunch. We're coming in, and they're having this big goodbye ceremony. And he's crying, and he makes this big plea to forgiveness, and we need to understand change. And it was like, even just talking about it right now, I'm getting a little bit of goosebumps, because it's a very powerful moment, but I had no idea what was happening. And many of us in the teacher training were kind of giving each other a side eye going, what is happening? And I knew I was a roommate with someone who was in a different program, but had been a long time when it had been the ashram. She had been someone who came. So I went and I sought her out and I said, Bev,
what?
Yeah, WTF, what is going on? And she sat me down and she said, when it was in the ashram days, it was segregated. There were a lot of issues. Brahmacharya is this idea of energy conservation and the Eightfold Path teachings of yoga. And there was a lot of this austere discussion around sexual behavior. But one of the upper members of the ashram was brought before for discipline, and because she had been carrying on a relationship with one of the men in the ashram, and they were accusing her of having sexual relationship and violating the confidence of the of the ashram. And she goes, well, why is it such a big deal? I've had sex with you, Amrit. And I know lots of people who've had sex. And I know your wife. has also brought people in for you to have, and it just
explosion. The bomb was dropped. Wow. Yeah. And you were there.
Well, I wasn't there when that happened.
When he was leaving.
But what was real, because I was there just a few years after, because it was like mid to late night. I think it was 1996 when that happened, maybe. Mm-hmm. And I was there in 2002. But after Bev told me this, Bev was there when it happened. But I had remembered my teacher constantly going on and on about her guru, not even her teacher, her guru, the light bringer, coming and giving her these blessings and these teachings. And suddenly I'm thinking, does Kirsten know? I don't even know if she's aware of what happened. And suddenly I'm walking through the Kripalu Center, and all I see are pictures of Swami Kripalu. That's it. I don't see Amrit's picture anywhere. And we get in for our next session, and Yoganand, now Michael Carroll, and Tarika, what's her name? Diane. I don't remember her last name, but they were there, Tarika and Yoganand, and they had been there during the schism and the split, and they went through this whole discussion about their story and what had happened, and that we needed to understand that there was this time when power dynamics was a really big problem, and how they had to work through that and what it was like for them. And I was in the after effect of it. So I was actually just observing people who were my teachers, still very upset, deeply traumatized, because Yoganand ran away and joined the ashram when he was 18 or something. And so he was in his 30s or something when it broke. So he had spent a lot of his formative adult years as this perfect, disciple almost. And I think that's something that people forget in yoga. Now yoga is more almost like a gym class. You go to a studio and you show up, but there are these underpinnings of what you talked about that are so I'm very familiar with some of the inner workings. It's just I think I've been lucky enough because I've been into some near cult experiences, and I do just enough to mess it up so that they kick me out.
Well, congratulations.
That's good.
That's what you want, and that's actually what I hope my work can bring forth in the world today, where people can make those kinds of questions and rattle the chains a little bit, or just like shake things up, and question and see what the response is to questions. You're asking about power dynamics, and holy cow, like when they are most powerful is when they're invisible.
Yes.
I was utterly blindsided by my teacher through those 18 years. I truly believed that he was someone who had not necessarily special spiritual powers, because like the memoir that I wrote about my experience is called An Everyday Cult. And that's because once I was, back in the normal world, and my, out of the cultic grip, I call it, I started to look at all the different cults, and the one that I was in interfaced with daily life in a way that's very different from some of the more typical things that we call cults. Like there were no vows. We did not have to, say vows. We did not have to bow to our teacher. We did not even have to commit to a daily meditation practice or anything like that. We had a different version of it, though. It looked and that different version was that we had to do homework. And our homework was something that actually was meditative, that was thought stopping and capturing of the mind, where we were literally asked to conjure up images from dreams because we worked with dreams a lot. So instead of like a meditation, we were, during the day, I would have to, think about some moment from my dream and bring that into my daily awareness. And then that would be like this, it would stop everything in my day. So instead of being fully present, like at my work or with my children or even driving my car, I would have this other brain activity going on where I thought I was connecting with my higher self. I was building a new muscle. But actually what was happening was disassociation.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And in addition to disassociation, it was also like thought stopping. So I was becoming indoctrinated. I became indoctrinated through this year after year, week after week, year after year of this practice that really turned my capacity for discernment, my capacity to critically judge what was happening around me.
Right.
I defaulted all the time. I defaulted to my teacher. And I can imagine, CT, in your work, I can imagine that you might get some couples. You do some divorce.
I do. I also do some work, mediation, and also some elder care and estate, which is, I think, even more like that's what draws me into some of the work that I've seen and read some of the things that you've posted. I listened to a couple of the podcasts.
Like if the parent was in the cult or something, and then
not even if the parent's starting to become more incapacitated, and then there are certain things and dynamics even within the family. If they're a very religious family, or if there's very specific directives that is in conflict, like one sibling wants something done in a very specific way, and then the other one is not, and the kind of dynamic families can be very messy.
Yeah, well, especially if you're talking about an estate, and maybe someone wants portions of that estate to be donated to the group or something like that. That could be hugely problematic.
Absolutely, and in fact, many people have lost their entire inheritance to cultic groups in those similar kinds of settings. There can be powerful manipulations, and I think that's important to consider in these either sibling or couples where there is a power dynamic. Like if there's a differential where one person has more power and the person that has less power doesn't know that the other one has power over them, which is what my experience was. Yeah. That's the kind of dynamic that creates obviously the ideal the perfect storm for abuse to take place.
Yes.
And also an impossibility to come to the table as equals, because they are not equals. And I was thinking, I'm just so excited to be speaking with you, because I was thinking about what is mediation? And that does require a certain level of emotional maturity and cognitive capacity.
Thank you. No.
CT, you might have to resign. I don't know if you can handle it.
No, CT, I'm talking about the obviously you have emotional maturity. I'm talking about the people that you're working with.
Yes. No, exactly. It's such a good point, because there's still very little that people seem to understand and know about mediation. It's in our society, it's very, very new. And it isn't really structured. And unfortunately, not just in Canada, but in the States, it's also striking as it's getting very political. Mm-hmm. And how is talking something out and making an agreement political? Like that's something that really makes me scratch my head a little bit, mm-hmm. right? And the other thing is, well, Gerette, our community is reeling right now from, I don't know if you've heard of it, but the documentary, The Program, has just mm-hmm. come out, and we're in Ogdensburg, New York.
That's where that school is located.
Yeah. Yeah. Listeners, I can see your face right now. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know some of the people involved in the in it, and I know that it's quite powerful.
Yeah.
I will definitely be watching it. So you are there. I thought it was in New York, or
New York.
Are you in?
It's in Ogdensburg, New York. Yeah, that's where Ivy Ridge is. But I'm also in the Thousand Island Gananoque in Ontario, so I straddled the border.
Yeah, we're both recent residents
Yes.
to Ogdensburg. I just moved from California. She just moved from Gan in Canada.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Wow.
And then this comes out, and we're
like, oh, we picked a good place. Actually, we really do love this little town.
Yeah,
but...
it's an amazing town. It's beautiful. It's so lovely. There's so much that it could be offering. It's right at the steps of the Adirondacks. I mean, there's so many
rivers.
things.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Beautiful. But this program has come out and dealing with a lot of the
locals are really having a hard time. The
Of
people who've been here for
course.
generations and who know a lot of the local people in the community are related somehow.
Yes.
There's a lot of
the staff members who were hired, and there's some people who are very angry about it. But one of the things I've been talking to some of the community about, as I said, the thing that actually bothers me is something I think you could definitely speak to, Gerette, is the biggest problem that I've learned quickly about how decisions have been made on a government level for division of resources and whatnot. You see it in restorative justice work in prison reform movements, where New York has been very much of, let's build our prisons up in northern New York, aka Ogdensburg, one of the places. We also had a large psychiatric hospital that was nationally recognized for a long time, still
over
is.
a century.
Yeah. That's been pushed up here because, we don't want to deal with the problem, so let's put it there. So a lot of these people who are from here, their jobs are very reliant on, the only industry here are these government or private school people who've just come in and said, this is the job that's available. There's really no other alternatives unless you turn to crime.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so everyone's been quite angry.
Or you're lucky like we are and have some other remote work
to deal with, or you get to work across the border in Canada. So there's a lot of people who have been we're watching the fallout from this program because these children came from fairly wealthy, affluent backgrounds, and were put in conditions that were worse than prison. All of the power had been taken away from them. The type of programming, the kind of violence that had happened to them psychologically, mentally, scarring. But one of the more powerful aspects of that program is they were mentioning one of these, when he was a child, he led a riot. They ended up calling the police. The police took him to prison, and they asked him in the documentary, well, what was that like? He said it was great. was like a vacation, that prison was better than being at Ivy
You had
Ridge.
more autonomy.
Yeah. You could look out the window.
Yeah. You could actually talk to someone.
You could sleep in your bed with the lights off as opposed to in the hall with the lights
And
on.
no door.
Yeah.
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 Crazy.
It's an extraordinary process that the town must be going through. I'm really, it's a really interesting thing, having grown up rurally, and in New York State. That's where I've grown up. I'm in Vermont now, but New York State has been my home. So I've never thought, with all these documentaries coming out, The Vow, like so many of them, they have this ripple effect, this massive impact that takes place. And one of the, for example, you can look at like The Vow, the one about Keith Raniere, who's in prison for 120 years. That the area where he's from, it's a similar dynamic.
Yes.
But I never thought about that, what you were just describing about this way that these difficult aspects of, human nature, like, okay, the prisons, let's put them out in the rural area. Let's relegate them to this place. And therefore, the residents of that area become, in a way, dependent on, as you were saying, their livelihood. And it's supposed to be a good job. It's a well-paying job.
Exactly.
So of course you take it, you think you're in something, like you think that you're in something that's really good, and you believe that you're part of something that's good. So I just want to extend kind of like a heartfelt angst, acknowledgement.
Yes.
To the people of the town who have been impacted.
Yes.
Because they've gone through, I think there's a kind of similarity to the process of indoctrination that I went through, which, I mean, it's different, but I think there can be some common threads.
Oh, for sure. At the Stanford prison experiment, if they even want to look that up, it's like they could probably identify, oh my gosh, that's right.
Yeah. It happens. It can happen so quickly.
Yeah.
Like at Stanford.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It was interesting too, what you were saying, just to go back a little bit about the meditation that you were using. And I thought it was especially interesting that you mentioned while you were driving. So I don't know if I've talked to you much about this, CT, but I'm technically a certified hypnotherapist. I studied hypnotherapy at the College of Hypnotherapy in Tarzana, California. I've never practiced it. I only went there just to learn about what that was and some of the background of it. I never had any intention of actually practicing.
That we know of.
Yeah. And part of it
Cat's
too.
out of the bag.
Yeah. Part of it too is they do teach a very strict code of ethics. You cannot practice on someone a friend, a coworker, anyone that you have any kind of remote power dynamic. You cannot practice on them. It must be a stranger through a proper practice where they're coming to you knowingly for a specific purpose, and they know that this is.
So you can't tackle them in the supermarket.
Right. Yeah. Nothing like that.
Sit next to them on a plane and just start hypnotizing.
But one of the main things that we learned about, I mean, basically what all hypnotherapy is just a very deep meditation, and that we do go into that state a lot in a very common way that we naturally will go into that state is when we're driving, which is why when we take it, when someone's on a regular long commute, and we were very familiar with this in Los Angeles, where a normal commute might be a half hour each way sometimes, and you're doing that every single day, twice a day, you will get to the point where you forgot driving. Like you leave home and you get to work and you I have no memory of actually driving my car here today. It's very, very common because you do go into a kind of meditative state, and your body just goes into this, muscle. What's that called?
Muscle memory.
Yes, muscle memory.
Yeah.
Exactly. And when you are in that meditative state, if you're thinking about things that you were talking about, and that's dropping into your subconscious, that is so much easier to become indoctrinated into those thought processes.
Mm-hmm. Actually, I think that's what draws me to some of your work, because right on your page, you have I love the title, by the way, Writing to Reckon Journal. So making almost like a conscious effort to walk through things. It's only $5, listeners. You can get it right from her website. I'm going to shamelessly plug it for a moment, because I actually really liked looking at what it offers as well. And could you maybe give us a little bit of an understanding of why did you choose to write this? What is this about? What can people expect?
Yay, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, Writing to Reckon for me has really become a cornerstone of the integrative process that I think anyone who has experienced power over abuse of any kind, where there's been a power differential and there's been, some kind of violation, or you have violated others. Like leaders suffer, especially leaders who have been, groomed through a process of indoctrination.
That's so true.
Then there's like the moral injury that takes place. So wherever there's this injury, emotionally, psychologically, physiologically, because it certainly does manifest in our bodies as well. The practice of writing is one that just allows us to go back safely. And this is the Writing to Reckon Journal and all the programs that I facilitate around writing. Each person has absolute autonomy to decide who and what their writing is for. And it's very important that people decide for themselves whether it will be shared or not with anybody, or whether it will become public. But the process itself of writing, that is in and of itself integrative.
Yes.
Like literally, and I think that in an ideal world, we would all have some opportunities to write longhand on paper, because it does have a slightly different experience in the brain. There's more cross-lateral integration that takes place when you're like writing across a page of paper. And that is, in my personal experience, slightly more integrative. And with that being said, I will also, say unequivocally that the majority of my writing is done at my computer. So it's, writing in any way is helpful, whether you're texting it, whether you're, writing it on birch bark, or, on a tree, or on a cave wall.
Or even in Braille. I mean, I was always really fascinated with a friend of mine who had access to all of these audio. I went through different trainings with her, and she was very much about writing and using Braille to write with and make notes. And I said to her one day, I said, isn't it just easier if you're just like recording it and listening? She goes, I won't remember it as well. And it's true. And you're right. Even just that process, like she had that ability to just go and learn that, and how important, even for someone who cannot see, needs that actual kinetic connection.
Exactly. And it has so many so many layers to it, because like the physical process is one. There's also like the whole emotional, like, returning to something that was difficult. When we can return to it within the safety of our own psyche, and there's sometimes having the safety actually of a writing prompt. So there's like the guidance, just a little gentle framework that you can use. And it's always optional. You can use a tiny bit of it or none of it, as far as the prompts go, that is. But that experience of bringing yourself back in and allowing the words to come however the heck they want to come. There's no need to make complete sentences. Punctuation doesn't matter, but just giving oneself the space to articulate allows the psyche to find a new kind of integration. So there's the emotional, there's the psychological, and like I have literally I've experienced for myself many times and witnessed in multiple people, as through these programs, that it's like you settle into your body more. When you've written something. I literally just had this experience last night where I was really struggling with something, this kind of unconscious thing bubbling up. I couldn't quite articulate what it was. I had the opportunity to share with a couple of people. And then after that experience, the words that had come out in that sharing, I then brought into my journal, and it just poured out. And I felt like a million times lighter, like it helps. It just works. Writing is just such a beautiful thing. And for some people who are not writers, I believe that talking is a version of writing. I believe that going for a walk can really be incorporated into a writing integrative experience.
I am so glad you said that. No, truly. Even cooking or dishwashing, there could be something very meditative about doing something that can help your mind sort of process things. But that verbal processing can be very important as well. Hence why I think podcasts can work. I mean, I find it very meditative. So just so you know, this is my house here on the New York side, but I haven't fully completed my immigration process. It's what's happening right now is I have like these 2 more things that the U.S. immigration has just asked that I get before they give me my visa. So it's like, this is happening. You're married to an American. It's happening. You have this house. It's all good.
Congratulations.
Thanks. We just need this one thing. I'm like, all right, fine. But on the Gananoque side, I've had to live with my parents again. And when I make dinner, one of the things I love to do is throw on a podcast. Or it can be music, but I do love my true crime podcast. And I'm just, going through the steps, making dinner, and I'm just listening to this thing. And it's just my routine. And if my mom or my dad comes in, and my mom always feels that she has to keep company with me because that's what she likes. When she's making dinner, she wants someone to have company with her. And I've been with her, Gerette, for 4 years now almost. That's how long it's been. This whole process has been very long. And we've had multiple conversations about this. I'm like, Mom, just leave me alone. I do not. I'm making the dinner. I've got the podcast on. I'm good. I do not need you to sit down here and talk to me because it's disruptive. And that disruptive, right? Yeah. And that disruptive process, what I've noticed is sometimes I'll entertain her because she's bored right? And she wants the company. And it's like, okay, I'll make dinner and I'll entertain you. I've talked to a whole bunch of people today. I've done a whole bunch of other things. I mean, I really wanted this alone time, but sure.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah, let's make this about you right now. No problem. So we're going, and what I find, and I had to actually stop and apologize to her at once because we were starting to get into an argument. What it was is I'm not having that processing, that integration time, that ability to, she's disrupting my flow, for lack of a better term. And so I'm actually getting stressed and tense, and it's causing this friction. And it's starting to have this power differential where I feel I'm being controlled by my mom. Like, you're here and you're in the space. You wanted me to make, I like, if it all becomes you, like, you wanted me to make dinner and you wanted me to make it at this certain time. And now you want to be here and you want to sit and talk at me. You don't even want to hear my opinion. And it's just like, oh my gosh, how did I get here? So I really love that you have workshops and these things that you're empowering people to consider going into their own process, taking that time for themselves and not having that need to share it with you or to share it with other people. It's not about us. It's about the person who's choosing to do it. I think that's so key.
Absolutely. It's so important, and that there is a conscious decision and the respect of one's space. It sounds to me, CT, that cooking, listening time, that's your jam time. Yeah. Like, that's the time that you're like, just give me my space. I'm in this place that works for me. And I can imagine that your psyche is integrating a lot of different things, even as you're listening. Because if you're listening to true crime or whatever it is, there's dynamics there that are related to what you're dealing with during the day in some way or another. And that by giving yourself that space to listen, you get to integrate. And I would say, in an ideal world, there would be a way that you could, after that experience, either do a quick journal entry or a quick conversation with, maybe your mom or someone else about any little thoughts or gems that come out of that time, because I think that's gold time.
Oh, yes, I agree. I love sitting down with my son and having conversations over dinner. That's the ritual, right? And that's the family time that I really, really love. So I'm happy when my parents come to the dinner and then we have the conversation. And my mom has now learned that, it's just sometimes it's her house, right? She's, it's my house and this. So there's that conscious and I'm, of course, the daughter that has moved back into the house, and my mother has aged too. So I'm now facing my mom having increased health care needs and whatnot. So you start realizing there's that weird time where she's become the child in many ways. I've had to check certain things, and I've had to remind my parents that they've already told me that 3 times in the past hour. Just things like that, and I see them getting scared as well.
Yeah. What a time. Yeah.
So how do people who are in complex power dynamics, because families, as I said, they're so messy. I'm in a messy situation too. So when there's a family mediation coming my way, I'm like, I feel you.
Yeah.
What are some things that they could do to prepare before they even mediate? Because honestly, I've given out already a recommendation. You're in my resource. So mediators, I've in my communities and whatnot, I said, you know what? Consider offering writing to reckon for people. Like, just so you know.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But
wonderful.
just other than that, what are some things you think that the general listener who's going, oh my gosh, I'm in this power dynamic. I think I've woken up, I'm in a cult. I've woken up, I'm in this terrible workplace, toxic workplace situation, with a manager breathing down my neck. What do I do? What could you say? What could you offer?
Yeah, gosh, that's such a great question. What comes to mind, there's a lot that comes to mind, but I think one of the first things is to remember to pause. Because when we're in an environment where there's a power differential, most likely there's some kind of sense of urgency or some kind of pressure to get something done, or something should be in a certain way.
And an agreement needs to be had. Yeah.
Yeah. Before you try to come to any agreement, give yourself the gift of taking some time to simply to kind of nail your feet to the floor in a way, just to stay present and observe. And just watch, notice what you're seeing. Are you seeing exchange in the relationship? Is there back and forth? Is there, or is one person giving more in a certain way? And when one person gives, how is it received?
Right.
Just notice those kinds of potential imbalances. And there's imbalance everywhere. It's not like there's ever going to be a perfect, magic, couple. And yet, we're all humans. So we all make mistakes. But when we see, and I think a really important part of the pausing is to notice patterns. It's one thing if there's an imbalance around this dinner time that you're talking about, with mom or something like that. And there's a whole nother thing if that gets blown into every aspect of life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So where are the patterns or are there patterns? And just to try to notice those things, because where there's a pattern, that's something to kind of pay attention to. It's also really interesting. I want to just mention that the work of Dr. Steve Hassan, he's created what he calls a strategic interactive approach to working with when families are in, where someone is involved in a cultic environment and you're the whole family is working to support that person. There's a lot of complexity, as you know, in that situation. And it might be interesting to look at his strategic interactive approach. And I want to tell Dale one thing, too. I thought of Steve Hassan earlier because he also is a hypnotherapist, or, he has a background in hypnosis. And he's a therapist, a doctor, he's 40 years out of a cultic group. He was in the Moonies.
Oh, wow.
He was? Oh, my goodness. I was telling you earlier about how back in high school in grade 11, I did a sociology paper and I got to interview a parent who had been involved at the workplace. I worked in my mother's daycare, and one of the parents there had been in the Moonies. And so I had a chance to learn all about the Moonies. And that was very interesting cult.
Yeah, I don't know much about them.
She was one of the people who got married You know, he was famous for having this mass wedding.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She got
the closest
married.
I ever got, which is not really close at all, is going through one of those test things with the Scientologists in front of the.
You did? You went to one of those?
Yeah, but I knew I could tell exactly what they were doing. So the whole time I was really just messing with them. Like they were trying to get me to tell all my, secrets and dark, problems and things. I'm like, no, I'm doing pretty good. Actually, yeah, I don't have any problems. And I knew like the little reader thing was, reading like the electric pulse in my fingers. So I would purposely just not quite touch it, but make it look like I was touching it. And they're like, there's something wrong with this reader. I'm not getting anything off of you at all.
You know what? I wasn't, because I was, as I was saying to you Gerette, earlier too, is, I during that paper time, that research, I went down to downtown Toronto to this large Scientology center, and I marched right in wanting to interview someone about their cult.
Yeah.
So I actually never did at that time the testing, and that I should have even thought about that. But I went by myself. As a 16-year-old, probably not the best. Kind of good.
It was around that age
stupidly
that I
said, like, I just want to interview someone about a cult, and then they pretty much kicked me out.
It was actually about that age that I considered going, not for any that I was really interested in them, but my voice teacher at the time, she was an opera singer, and she was a Scientologist, but she had entrance into the Celebrity Center in Los Angeles. So I could have gone there, and you can really make some great connections,
of course,
professionally there. But I was like, I'm not really feeling the same thing, so I didn't do that. But who knows? Maybe if I had, I would have actually gotten one of those sitcoms that I had auditioned for.
Are you sure you weren't secretly a Scientologist and
no,
you're slowly trying
really
to
wasn't.
encourage? Okay.
I'd venture to guess too, though, that had you gone in there as that 16-year-old and asked, I mean, I love that question. Can I talk to someone about how you became a cult? That is beautiful, because if you had gone in with anything but that, you would have been absolute, just like bait for them.
Right.
Yeah,
and it is very possible. Scientology has ways of really, reeling you in. So who knows?
I mean, it's very successful.
Yeah, I guess I evaded them that day.
Yeah. So
Bravo. I love it. And let that be, I actually think that's another great example of what we can do if we're sensing power dynamics. Blurt out some kind of absurd, humorous kind of thing. See what happens.
Oh, that's what gets me in trouble every single time. Okay, I got in trouble when I was on a Vipassana meditation as well, Gerette. So I went on that 10-day Goenka training, and I broke the rules.
Good.
They brought me in front of the teacher and they asked me questions, and it was, in the end, they let me stay through the whole process, and I did learn a lot from it. But yeah, I'm definitely someone who gets in trouble with all of those.
Bravo for you.
I'm just not a good rule follower.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic.
Honestly, I feel like we could just talk the day away. And I really thank you so much for being, for gracing us today, for being so patient with us while we had our tech issues. And what's next for you? Like, what are some things that we can look forward to, an event you're hosting, say, in the summer or anything?
Oh, thank you so much for asking. So there are two things that come to mind. One is that starting in May, I am, sorry, you can cut that part off because it's not going to happen before me.
Yeah,
we'll cut that out.
Forget that. Okay. So two things come to mind. One is that I am facilitating a couple of ongoing, like monthly Writing to Reckon classes for people who are troubled by what's happening in the world in terms of democracy and politics, and really giving people an opportunity to articulate, to bring some words to paper or computer or writing tablet, and come together to kind of share some of the ideas that we're experiencing, because the despair that I've witnessed is concerning to me. And like I said earlier, writing is just one way that could potentially help people. So I'll be facilitating that with a good friend and colleague of mine who's an expressive arts therapist named Esther Friedman. So that is something that's coming up. I also will be doing in the fall. I don't have the date set yet, but we're working on it. It'll be in either late September, early October, sometime around there. But a larger Writing to Reckon conference where it'll be online, and it will have I will have a number of people who I have worked with and really benefited from their expertise to really infuse the writing process with kind of next level inspiration. So those are two things that I would, love to be shared and highlighted, as well as my ongoing work, where anyone is welcome to attend or either drop in Writing to Reckon class or the Connections program that I offer ongoing. And the Connections program happens 3 times a year. And they're a small group that come together for 7 weeks. And we really build a little mini safe community of connections through writing together. So those are 3 options. Oh my gosh.
I love it. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And I hope we'll have an opportunity soon to talk again, and maybe a part 2 or part 3 of all of these wonderful things that you offer. I just, everything that you say, I'm just like, listeners, you can't see me, but I'm just like, ooh, yes, ooh. Such a delight. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in this week and having a chance to meet this amazing person and all the work that she does. And if you have any questions, we'll post some of her stuff on the show notes, and you can even just write to us at toughcallmediation@gmail.com. And don't forget, tune in next week and maybe we'll get a chance to speak to her again. Thank you so much.
CT, and Dale, I think we've just barely scratched the surface. Yeah. I do look forward to continuing. Excellent. It's an honor, an absolute honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Tune in next week. Bye.
Bye. This podcast brought to you by Blush Productions. Our senior producer and editor is Tyrai Laughton. Tech advisor is Ken Ehler. Media by Hope Ersick. Original music by Tyrai Laughton. Email your questions to toughcallmediation@gmail.com. Like, rate, and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Check out ehlerservices.com for more information.